Delighted to say I've got Dr. Rakib Ersan from the Henry Jackson Society on the channel today with an interesting new report. First of all, Rakib, how are you, mate?
I'm very well, Michael. How you been keeping?
Yeah, well, thank you. And you got a very important and interesting new report out from the Henry Jackson Society.
So my report, it's this title is BLM, A Voice for Black Britons, and essentially it explores the degree to which the movement and its objectives are representative of not only the wider general population in the UK, but particularly Black British people. And the report finds that while the majority of Black British people do feel that the UK has serious issues with racism and police brutality, what was really interesting was that when it came to the hard left objectives and behaviors associated with the BLM movement, so what I mean by that is, for example, calling for the dismantling of the market economy, reducing investment for police forces with a view to eventually abolishing them. And when we've seen forms of direct action such as toppling statues, only a minority of Black British people support these objectives. And the overwhelming majority do not see those various forms of direct action as acceptable forms of political protest.
Yeah, you put out this tweet yesterday with some of those poll findings on there in terms of tearing down statues, burning the Union flag, damaging business property,
Mm,
use of force on a police officer. And as you put it, the booming majority remain firm in their respect for the rule of law. I think this is
absolutely.
important because all too often, a noisy minority
Mm.
in terms of the far left can give the impression that there's some sort of groundswell of public support for these sorts of actions. And of course, your report shows that that isn't the case.
No, absolutely, and I think I'd make the point that when we're talking about those radical objectives and behaviours, they can alienate people, Michael, from the broader anti-racism movement. And I think it's really good to see here that the figures show that the wider general population and Black British people are very firm in their respect for the rule of law. That they ultimately, if they have political grievances, they want them to be expressed in a democratic manner within British law. I'd also make the point, Michael, that when you go beyond the inner city areas of London, Birmingham, Leeds, and Bristol, and much of the general population probably don't have very close ties with the Black British individual. So their perceptions will be very much shaped by what they see in the media and the news. And much of that has been focused on the BLM demonstrations and protests, which were apparently largely peaceful. Yet there's figures that have recently come out from Scotland Yard, which have shown marked rise in racist abuse and violence towards Black British police officers. And I think it's been very disappointing, Michael, that anti-racist organisations, they've been pretty much silent in terms of expressing solidarity with Black British police officers who suffered such abuse and violence during those demonstrations, because these are ultimately public sector workers on the front line. And I think that was very disappointing, their silence, you could say, on those unfortunate incidents.
Okay, can I ask what findings did you find the most striking overall in this report?
I think not so much striking, but I thought what told an interesting story was that around 6 in 10 Black Brits feel that the UK has a fundamentally racist society. Around the same number also attach importance to their British national identity. So I think that it is possible to be both patriotic and feel that there needs to be considerable social, economic, and political reform. I think that point needs to be made. I think that what was really striking is the differences within the Black British population. Quite often we hear about a Black community as if it's a singular, a single voice population that sings from the same hymn sheet. Clearly not the case. There's very notable differences, for example, between people of Black African origin and Black Caribbean origin. So when compared to Black British Caribbeans, people of Black African origin, they're more likely to be positive about the current state of UK race relations. They're less likely to say that they had an unstable family life during their childhood. They're more likely to attach importance to their religious identity. And ultimately, they're more likely to say that they are satisfied with life in the UK. So I think it's really important that we get away from homogenizing very different ethnic groups purely on the grounds that they may share the same racial identity, because I think that's a very poor way when it comes to that's a very poor way of setting social policy, and I think ultimately it reduces the quality of our broader political discourse.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of the fact we need to treat people as individuals and stop allowing people to somehow put themselves forward as representatives of different groups who within them will have vastly different opinions, as of course the British public do overall. Rakib, was there anything in this report that surprised you in terms of the findings?
I think in terms of what surprised me, I would say that what was particularly alarming, you could say, was that 3 in 10 Black British people felt that the NHS had treated their racial group unfairly through its management of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as you know, Michael, even though we come from traditional Labour voting families, we both agreed that the NHS should not be beyond criticism. And in some ways, it does need to be improved as a healthcare system. And I think it's really interesting to see that when we look at those levels of vaccine hesitancy, so people who aren't particularly trusting of the vaccine program, there's particularly high rates of hesitancy in Black British communities, even higher when compared with communities of Bangladeshi and Pakistani origin. So I think that as we move forwards, we do want to open up parts of the economy and rebuild following the COVID-19 pandemic. So the efficiency of the vaccination program is crucial here, especially when it comes to engaging with harder to reach distrustful groups. So I think that was an important part of the report for me.
What's the response? What sort of response have you had to the report so far?
Well, I had one academic who was very negative about the report after 5 minutes of reading it. Michael, it must be a very quick reader because the report is in the region of 20,000 words. And if you actually read the report properly, he would have seen that there were sort of pretty strongly progressive recommendations, you could say. So I talked about tougher anti-racist regulations for the labour market. I also talked about, as you said, how we can increase vaccine uptake, COVID-19 vaccine uptake in distrustful Black British communities. And I really feel that all too often when you talk about the academic sector, there's not that sense of actually engaging with other people's work. I've always welcomed criticism of my work on the basis that someone's actually clearly engaged with it properly. So in terms of the broader reaction, I think that a lot of people actually say, oh God, I'm surprised that only 1 in 6 Black British people feel that toppling statues is a legitimate form of political protest. So in a sense, I'm really pleased that people are engaging with the findings on the whole. And it's really started a discussion on how truly representative is the BLM movement and its core objectives in respect to the Black British population.
And finally, what's your takeaway from this research and this report in terms of where UK race relations are, what needs to be done in the future? I mean, I certainly think one of the things we need to stop doing, and your report highlights this, is we need to stop allowing, far left elements to put themselves forward, as I said, of having mass public support from various different people when they simply do not, as being somehow representative. I think, the media obviously play a part in that because they can help to elevate some very, very fringe opinions. But what's your overall conclusion about how we best move forward?
I think that in terms of our conclusion, I think there's 3 main points to make there. I think on the basis of the findings, I think there is much work to do when it comes to improving social cohesion, equality of opportunity, and how British citizens interact with state institutions. And I think there's definitely improvements to be made in terms of police community relations in respect of Black British communities. I think what I would say, though, is that when it comes to the hard left objectives and behaviors associated with the BLM movement, I do think there's a potential there that it actually undermines the broader anti-racist movement. I made this point that when it comes to this sort of far left revolutionary activity, whether it's within BLM or Extinction Rebellion, it actually has a potential to undermine what are important social causes, such as creating a more meritocratic society, a racially fairer society, and when it comes to creating a more environmentally sustainable society. I don't see I don't see why it has to take attacking police officers or creating blockades which prevent access for ambulances in central London. These are just extreme forms of action which have no place in liberal democracy, Michael. I'm very firm in that view. But what was very important about the report, you do say what was striking. What I found really interesting was the importance of family background. So, you control for a range of factors. If someone says that they had a stable family life during their childhood, they're notably more likely to say that they're satisfied with their current day life. And I think all too often we don't really see the family being discussed in terms of its immense social value. Because for me, Michael, we can talk about welfare and all the rest of it. Ultimately, a stable family unit is the finest form of social security in modern day Britain, and it provides the vital foundations for personal development and long-term life satisfaction. So I think that when it comes to social policy in the UK, it needs to take a decidedly family-oriented direction.
Dr. Rakib Hassan, fascinating report. I'll put a link down below for people who do want to go and read it. And guys,
very kind.
Great to have you back on the channel, mate, and we'll speak again soon.
No doubt, Michael. Thank you for having me.